Hello, this is take three. Good afternoon, good morning, happy day. I hope you are all well. Welcome to day 2 of APES e-learning. Today we are talking about landfills, incineration, and hazardous waste. I'm going to put myself down here. Hopefully that will be away from the words. Okay, so things I would like for you to know. Number one, agenda. So remember, first things first, you need to use your Heron email to fill out your Google Forms. Your Heron email should be your first name dot last name at heronhighschool.org. And if you need your password, email helpdesk at heronhighschool.org and they'll help you get set up. Just to give you a heads up on how I'm grading those, your IP points are separate. So like that IP quiz, those 3 questions or 4 questions, those are going to be graded for accuracy. So last time if you got a 3, you got them all right. But the IP upload, so like the place to upload your reading guides, it's actually also in that same Google form. So that bell work is going to generate 2 different grades in the grade book, an IP practice quiz grade and then an IP grade. Second thing is the lecture. This video is going to be on Edpuzzle. Please make sure you're using a nickname on Edpuzzle that I can like tell that it is you. Because if you put Fred as your name, I do not know Fred. There's no Fred in our class. So make sure that you're using your name or a name that I know you as, to make sure you get, like, it's going to be like a completion point to watch the video and answer those questions on the video. There's going to be a poll up on Haiku just to see your preferences on Edpuzzle. I've gotten some people that are like, I like Edpuzzle. I've gotten some people that are like, I do not like Edpuzzle. Reason why I'm using it is because it lets me see that you are actually watching the video. If I would just make another Google form that has like the 3 multiple choice questions from the lecture in it, you can just fill that out without watching the video, and that's not what I want. So, but I do want your feedback on it, so there's going to be a poll on Haiku about the Google form, or about Edpuzzle. Third thing we're going to do today is some College Board multiple choice. It's just going to be a few questions. You're going to need to sign in to AP Classroom. Hopefully you know your sign-in info. If you don't, I think you can reset your password on AP Classroom. And if you have more problems than that, email me. A lot of times with AP Classroom, like, you end up having to email College Board yourself. And fourth thing we're doing today is a web quest. It's about Superfund sites and phytoremediation, and you're going to use a Google form to upload photos of your work, or you can download the Word document that's posted and just like type your answers on there, including your name. Make sure you include your name. And then you could upload that to the Google form. There's going to be a highlight video for pro tips of how to use the Superfund websites, because it's not super duper user friendly. So a video for pro tips. It's going to be short, just taking you through the clicks in the website. IP for tonight is to read module 54 and complete that reading guide, to be uploaded on Monday, because Friday's a B day. Reminder, I have office hours every day from 1 to 2 p.m. Chester can make appearances by request. Usually he's napping. Between 1 and 2 p.m. he naps a lot. So come to my office hours, ask me questions. If you just need some like face-to-face, say hello, come to my office hours. I'll be there. Okay, so moving into our notes. You can call these notes landfills and incineration. You can call them like how we handle municipal solid waste. Anything like that works. So since the dawn of humanity, we have been asking ourselves, what are we going to do with all this trash? So, right? Oh, I forgot our overarching theme. Our overarching theme is that there's no such thing as a way. So this is something that we've talked about in APES before. There's no such thing as throwing something away. You're just throwing it somewhere else. And it has to be either dealt with by somebody else, or it's incinerated and turned into different matter, but there's no such thing as anything going away. It just gets relocated. Okay, so what are we doing with our waste? 54% of it gets discarded. That means like landfills, dumping. It can also mean incineration. 34% of it gets recycled or reused or composted. And then 12% of it gets combusted with energy recovery. So what that means is that they would burn that trash and then they would make electricity uh, from the heat that they get off of it. So they heat up water, turn a turbine, turn a generator, generate electricity. Okay, landfills. So landfills in the United States are the primary destination for municipal solid waste. Most of our waste goes to landfills. Big thing to know about landfills is that they produce leachate. Leachate, or I like to call it trash juice, is water that leaches through solid waste and removes various chemical compounds with which it comes into contact. So water is the great dissolver, right? Water will dissolve just about anything if you give it enough time. So when water makes its way into a landfill, or like, sometimes you throw away stuff that has water in it, as it makes its way through a landfill, it comes into contact with other stuff in that landfill. It can pull compounds out of the other stuff as they decompose. Um, and then if there is no leachate collection system in that landfill, that water can end up in the groundwater if the landfill is not a sanitary landfill. Another thing to know is that not much decomposition actually happens in a landfill. So because of the way that we build landfills now, there's not a lot of open air contact with that trash. And so the decomposition that trash is doing is called anaerobic, ANAEROBIC. That means that not with oxygen, right? Not with air. So that decomposition happens very slowly. So there have been cases of archaeologists going and digging up landfills and doing like archaeological digs on landfills and finding newspapers that are 50 years old because they just have not decomposed yet. Sanitary landfills, which are what we have now, are engineered ground facilities designed to hold municipal solid waste with as little contamination as possible. Sanitary landfills are the norm now. They were not always the norm. So 50 years ago, sanitary landfills were not required. And so we went from about, I believe, about 20 or 19,000 like town dumps to about 2,000 sanitary landfills around the country. What does a sanitary landfill look like? Oh, I'm in the way. There we go. So if you notice here, I've got I got two different landfill like areas on this slide. So this area here is the one that is still open and accepting trash. That trash comes in via a trash truck. Truck comes, dumps your garbage, and then you have this little compactor. Looks like a Tonka toy. They're actually quite big. So those compactors come, they drive around, they smush down the trash. And then some landfills at the end of every day will take a layer of soil and they'll layer that landfill, like that new trash, with a layer of soil. That is to try to keep the rodents down so they don't have rats. Just one of the things that they're trying to make it like not unpleasant to live within a near vicinity to a landfill. So there are a lot of things that landfills will do to keep away like pests. Down here, notice this lining. I'm pointing, you can't see my finger. Okay, notice this lining. This lining is clay. So remember, we have three different soil particles. We have sand, silt, and clay. Clay is the smallest. So That clay liner prevents your leachate from getting into the groundwater. So you want to put something that's not very permeable as the liner to your landfill. It can be clay, it can also be plastic. And then you also have the leachate collection system and some gravel. So that gravel works to filter some of the water that leachate as it comes down, and then that collection system collects that leachate and they send it to a landfill. No, they send it to a wastewater treatment plant. I got landfills on the brain. Wastewater treatment plant, leachate. That leachate is then goes through primary treatment and secondary treatment and is disinfected and then is put back into a waterway. What else we got? We got sand. So sand also works to filter that water. And then when our landfill gets full, we cap it. So there's usually a layer of soil or clay that goes on top, and then they will seed the top of that capped landfill with seeds so you can have some green space. Before they cap it, they put in what's called a methane extraction system. So methane is a greenhouse gas, as you may recall, and it is super flammable, and when it mixes with other gases, it can become explosive. And so that methane extraction system extracts that methane so you don't have a literal dumpster fire. Methane extraction system, you can actually use that methane to generate electricity. You can set it on fire, heat up some water, turn a turbine, turn a generator, generate electricity. All good things. Okay, landfill design, we just talked about this, but just in writing. You have a clay or plastic lining to keep that leachate from getting into the groundwater. You have pipes below to collect the leachate so it can go to a wastewater treatment plant. You have soil or clay to cover and cap that so that trash isn't open to the public or open to the air. And when that happens, that leads to your anaerobic decomposition, and that anaerobic decomposition is what leads to methane production. One thing to know, you got a tipping fee for a landfill. Every time a truck brings a load of trash to a landfill, they have to pay what's called a tipping fee. So they have to pay a fee to unload their truck. So you can kind of use those tipping fees as like a promotional way to use other methods of trash like removal. So if you want to encourage recycling in your municipality, you might increase your tipping fee and increase your trash rates in order to like promote people using recycling. One thing to know is that if you do that, you might end up with more people just dumping their trash, and that's not what we want. Okay, I got a story. So Puente Hills. This is the largest landfill in the United States. It is in Los Angeles, and it covers 1,365 acres. Puente Hills has 130 million tons of trash in it. So that's a hard number to think about, right? Like, what is 130 million of anything? So if you think about elephants, right? Think about an elephant. It would take 15 million elephants, which is still a really big number, 15 million elephants to fill Puente Hills with elephants. That is 20 times the number of elephants that are on Earth right now. So it's massive, okay? You can look kind of down here, like here's a freeway, these are cars, this is all landfill. Puente Hills is one that they do put dirt every day, fresh dirt every day over the compacted trash to try to keep rats down. And they also do the combined cycle electricity generation. So they take their methane, they set it on fire, they they combust it. I don't know why I always say set on fire. They combust it. They turn a turbine, they turn a generator, they generate electricity, and it makes 50 megawatts of electricity, and it powers not only the landfill itself, but also the surrounding town, like surrounding neighborhood. Pointed Hills got a clay liner in 1988, so it actually existed before then. So this is common, like most of the clay liners didn't come until like the mid 80s. So a lot of old dumps were just not unlined and they were leaking leachate into the groundwater, which is not ideal. Okay, note on methane. Remember, it is CH4. That is a greenhouse gas. It has a greater warming potential than carbon dioxide. So methane, we do not want to just emit into the atmosphere, not only because it has a greater warming potential than carbon dioxide, but also because it is flammable, highly flammable. One more thing about methane. It is produced by anaerobic decomposition. So if you don't have any oxygen to decompose, you will undergo anaerobic decomposition and you'll end up with some methane, which is all the things we just said. Landfill gas is not just methane, it's also carbon dioxide along with other gases. So depending on what you have going on in your landfill, you can end up with some of those other air pollutants that we talked about. Landfill gas can be explosive. It is super flammable, which is why, like, I want to say all, but like the AP person in me is like, it's never all, Tabby. But it's why landfills will burn their methane, even if they're not generating electricity because they don't want to emit it to the atmosphere. But should totally burn it to generate electricity because it is a source of energy for you. Okay, so what happens to the stuff when it ends up in a landfill? Notice I'm going to give you some decomposition times. In a landfill, it would actually be slower because it's undergoing that anaerobic decomposition, and that means that it's not going to decompose as fast. So if you start with some paper towel, it takes about 2 to 4 weeks to decompose. Give you an idea, it takes 19 days, so almost 3 weeks to binge watch every episode of Law and Order. You might have time to do that. Second thing is an orange or banana peel. That's 2 to 5 weeks. It takes about 4 to 6 weeks to get a passport. Apple core takes about 2 months to decompose. There's more fiber there. It takes about 2 months to grow your hair by an inch. If you're wearing cotton shirts, those take about 2 to 5 months to decompose. It takes about 5 or 6 months to build a house. If you have some plywood, that's going to take 1 to 3 years to decompose, whereas it took about 3 years to make Toy Story 3. Cigarette filters, which none of you should be smoking, they take about 1 to 5 years to decompose, so there's another reason to not smoke. It takes about 5 years to become a naturalized citizen. Plastic bags take 10 to 20 years to decompose, and even then they just break into smaller plastic. It took about 9 to 20 years to build the Great Pyramid of Giza. And nylon takes about 30 to 40 years to decompose, and it took 35 years to close the gender pay, or to narrow the gender pay gap by 20 cents. So this stuff takes a long time. Here's some levity for you in your quarantine days. We've got a plastic cup. We've got a banana. They're friends. The banana decomposes through those nutrient cycles, becomes a plant, and the cup is cursed to immortality. So make sure you recycle that cup. Okay, so which is not a reason to keep household batteries out of landfills? If you chose B, you are correct. So batteries can totally leak toxic materials, right? Like, don't put your batteries in a landfill. You can recycle them, which is like great on many fronts, and they do take up space. They are not typically organic, so they're not really going to put out much greenhouse gas, like not a lot of methane, not a lot of CO2. Not happening with batteries. Okay, reminder of NIMBY. So remember, not in my backyard. Stakeholders with influence and power oftentimes hold this attitude with proposed landfills, incinerators, wind farms, other undesirable installations. We talked about this with wind. We talked about it with solar panels. So people are like, oh yeah, it's totally fine. We have to have a landfill, but I don't want it close to me. So what other ape situations might face a NIMBY mindset? Take a moment, think about it. Maybe a wastewater treatment plant. Yeah. Okay, incineration. So incineration is the burning of municipal solid waste. A lot of Indianapolis's trash is incinerated. While it decreases the volume of municipal solid waste, you are left with ash. That ash then has to be disposed of. That bottom ash is the ash left in the incinerator. So that's the stuff that they go in and scoop out. And then there's fly ash, and that fly ash is collected from beyond the incinerator. So they're trying to keep as much of that matter in as possible. Thing with incineration is if you are incinerating stuff that has toxic materials in it, then you are putting those into the air. So like if you're incinerating something with lead, you could end up putting lead, making it like into ash that would be airborne. So thing about incineration, you always got to think about the air pollutants that come with it. Waste to energy. So this is when you have generated some kind of heat. So you're incinerating trash, you're combusting methane. You can make electricity by heating up water, turning a turbine, turning a generator, generating electricity. So that's a good thing we can get from landfills and incineration. My incinerator picture. Okay, so notice we have a waste dump into a refuse bunker here. They would also have a tipping fee. That refuse bunker is then that stuff is put into an incinerator. It then crane moves the stuff into the incinerator, lit on fire. Then there's that baghouse filter. Remember we talked about that being used to take like particulate matter and SOx out of the atmosphere, or out of the effluent of a incineration plant. That makes sure that the stuff coming out of the chimney is a little bit cleaner than what it would be if there were no baghouse filter. That ash is collected and removed, oftentimes taken to a landfill. Okay. Increasing tipping fees. What can happen? We can take a moment. If you chose increases in illegal dumping, that is correct. So it would probably increase the rate of recycling because you'd have more people not wanting to pay as much for trash pickup. It would give you more incentive for a solid or proper waste disposal, so you're getting rid of stuff correct or in the right way. It would reduce your use of hazardous materials. So especially if you increase those tipping fees for hazardous materials, you might use less of it, try to use something that's not hazardous. And it I feel like this is an accept question. It would not cause a, oh wait. Sorry guys. It would not cause a lack of funding for landfills. It would increase funding for landfills. Sorry about that. Okay, hazardous waste is a liquid, solid, gaseous, or sludge waste material that is harmful to humans. It is created by industry, small businesses, households. Hazardous waste can be anything from like medical waste to batteries, to like toxic materials that are made in industry. And then some regulations for you. So we got RCRA. RCRA stands for the U.S. Resource Conservation and Recovery Act. The goal of RCRA is to reduce the promotion of hazardous waste, and it has cradle to grave tracking. So if you are making hazardous waste, you have to be like, hey, I made this. And then you have to document like where it goes and how it's disposed of. And then it also gives law enforcement increased authority to punish violators. So RCRA has to do with hazardous waste like enforcement and making sure it is properly disposed of. Superfund, so remember Superfund is super fun. It imposes a tax on chemical and petroleum industries, and it funds the cleanup of abandoned hazardous waste sites. So if you have a contaminated site and it seems like nobody's responsible, that is going to be sometimes a Superfund problem. Sometimes it is a brownfields problem. So brownfields are the state and local level funding for hazardous waste sites. And we are going to look at some Superfund sites now. So here is a picture of Superfund sites within the circle in Indianapolis. Notice there's quite a few once you get closer to downtown. And then if we zoom in even further, the star is where Heron is. So notice there's lots of Superfund sites around. It's not uncommon. A lot of them are like old mechanic shops, old dry cleaners. It's not just Superfund sites. I think most of these are brownfields. So most of these are done by the state, but there are some Superfund sites that are in Indianapolis. Okay, so I have a Superfund web quest for you for the rest of class. There's going to be a short little video to show you like how to navigate that website. So don't forget office hours 1 to 2. Do the Google Forms. Send me pictures of your IP. Ask me questions. Please ask me questions. I hope you are all well. I hope that you are washing your hands and isolating yourselves. I will see you on Monday. Maybe. I can stop this.